Good morning. Welcome to Shambles Stay at Home Festival, and welcome to the giant mouth of Josie Long there. That was...
I will eat you. Oh, that's scary, isn't it?
Yeah, he's got a bit of spinach, by the way, just in the... just there. That's... Yeah, there, it's gone now.
How are you, Robin?
I'm very good. I last night watched, I don't forget how brilliant a film is, but there's certain films where they're brilliant and then you return to them and you go, this really is remarkable.
So
and last night I watched...
What it means is you will feel affected. Yeah, it's brilliant. My brain knows. And you're like, no, the heart feels.
Well, The Elephant Man.
God!
I watch almost. I think I only do it every 2 years because it's every 2 years because it's. I know I also made my 12-year-old watch it as well.
No, Robin.
Certificate
you know what happened to me?
Certificate Pete. Oh no, what happened to you? Go on.
You know what happened to me when my mum got us to watch Of Mice and Men and The Elephant Man back to back.
No, that's a lot. Well, that's an education, isn't it? That's when you're concerned that you haven't exposed your children to enough trauma, and they're not going to cope at university. So you just go.
Known that just 3 short years later they will be having a bitter and acrimonious divorce. So she could have just left those in the box. We haven't introduced you. We better.
I'm sorry.
No, it's exciting. This is Deborah Francis White. Hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm very well, and you're not meant to talk on the radio before you've been introduced because people think, who is that ghostly voice? This show has got Shambles in the name, so I feel like it's okay.
Also,
we find so many ways of being shambolic. There'll be new inventive ways of being shambolic. Can I see them? I do think. Sorry, Josie.
Oh, sorry. How did your son find the film?
Traumatic, because I've forgotten how, because it's only a PG and we have quite hard and fast rules on PGs and 12s and fighting with my family is fine, but some of the others a little bit. And we started watching The Breakfast Club the other day, which I don't like, by the way. I don't like because its ultimate message of, hey goth girls, why not wear white and clean yourself up a little bit, I feel is overly negative. But I'd forgotten how rude that was, so that got turned off quite quickly. But Elephant Man is, I think, quite emotionally traumatic, but so utterly beautiful. I think ultimately the message of it, it's just on every level. John Gielgud, Wendy Hiller,
Church.
And it is a very beautiful, the ending. But the traumatic moments of torture, the traumatic moments of Freddie Jones, again, absolutely wonderful. But
because he's so awful in that. Whenever I saw him in anything else, I was like, I know what you did and I will never forgive you.
Oh, you see, I was lucky because I was introduced to him in a TV show written by Richard Carpenter, who went on to write the Robin the Hooded Man series called Ghosts of Motley Hall, in which he was a cheeky ghost. So I knew him first as a cheeky ghost before I knew him as a cruel circus sideshow man. So that was kind of okay. But anyway, no, I just want to say this is such a remarkable piece of work. I think it is possibly David Lynch's great. And what I love about it as well is if you read David Lynch's autobiography, which is got a lot of interesting stories, is Mel Brooks fought so hard to make sure that David Lynch's vision, every time the studios lost their nerve, Mel Brooks would go in with another bit of shtick that he would use to make sure. And yet again, Mel Brooks becomes elevated to another level, and Anne Bancroft's in it as well. And it is, and that's what amazes me. As a film that ultimately became a mainstream film, it is artistically tremendously brave. It is tremendously at times bizarre. It is, it's just, it's one of the most, and it has got about 4. You taught me the term crying porn, and I would say that there's like 4 moments in The Elephant Man where the first one when he's reciting Psalm 23.
Oh, don't!
Mr. Cargom. Oh, every time. Yes, Mr.
Thank you you've all been so.
Yeah. Oh, and then going into looking at Hannah Gordon's house. Oh man, what a beautiful film. What's your one, Josie? What is your one where you just know, I've seen this 40 times, and yet my emotional reaction?
Well, it's absolutely not in the same league, but I watch, in terms of kind of trauma or anything like that, I watched Mean Girls the other day. I swear I've seen Mean Girls 10 times. It's so funny and so good and and every time I watch it, it feels more like a special treat of comfort and fun. I do have certain issues with it because there's a character that gets bullied. She gets bullied for being gay the whole way through, and then at the end they give her a boyfriend, and I remember sort of reading some people discussing it, sort of saying what a cop out that was, and then the more I watch it, I'm like, oh yeah, like it would, like that's them sort of smoothing the edges of what might have seemed difficult for them to get made or something. I don't know.
That's exactly the same as the Breakfast Club. That whole thing where you go, hey kids, be what you want to be, but preferably dressed in white with all lovely hair. And I feel that Simple Minds. What about you, Deborah? Do you have any particular film, television set, something that you just go, do you know what? So I'm just going to turn to this.
Well, I have one that I can't watch because I'm scared I won't have as big a reaction as I did. So when I was a little girl, on the last day of term, and children, if you're listening, we used to have last day of terms, and where the teacher would wheel out a television set, because in those days they were not attached to the wall, put on a film, and I think we were all about like 11, and they put on a black and white film with Mickey Rooney as a little boy playing a poor little rich kid on a cruise liner. And it's called Captain's Courageous. And he falls over the side and gets picked up by a fishing trawler. And the fishermen say, his name is Manuel, and he says, we'll take you back, but when we've finished fishing. And this little boy has never been given any attention by his parents, and at first reacts very badly to having to help. And by the time he is dropped back to his parents, he is clutching Manuel and I can't even talk about it virtually without crying, but just saying, please don't leave me, please don't send me back, because Manuel has become his father because he's never really had parents. And I sat amongst these 11-year-olds who were all joking and talking and laughing and passing sweets on my own, this rabble around me. If no one was interested in this old black and white film except me, and I just sat there sobbing and sobbing and sobbing on my own. The following year, I'm not making this up, they played the same film on the last day of term, and the same thing happened. I sat there crying like I'd lost my own father, and I've never seen it since. And Tom is very good at hearing these stories. Tom's my husband. He hears a story like that, and he then finds it and puts it in my Christmas stocking, sort of something I've said I loved from childhood. And he gave it to me one Christmas, and I haven't dared watch it because what if it's just cheesy and corny? And I'm like, why was I crying at this?
We were talking about this yesterday, talking about with the goodies and things like that, where people sometimes get, as adults, become critical of what they loved as a child, and you go, no, these are separate issues. Do not lose the love you had for. See, the one that still gets me, and I used to talk about it, and I did about a 10-minute reenactment in one of the shows that I once did, is oddly enough the film The Wild Geese, the mercenary action film with Richard Burton and Hardy Kruger and Richard Harris and Roger Moore, in which Roger Moore plays the Irishman and Richard Harris plays. Anyway, it's a very confused film in one way, but it has a scene where Richard Harris, who's been bringing up his son on his own, has to tell him he won't be with him at Christmas. And the little boy is very upset. He's got all this pile of presents. Do you want to open your presents? And he goes, no, Father, I'd better go back. And he runs back to go and play a sport. And he just goes, I love you. And he doesn't see the little boy as he's running away, just saying under his breath, I love you too. And it's like, every time.
Yeah, but there's a Cadbury's Dairy Milk advert that was the quickest made me cry, which went, you're a really good footballer, son. You're a really good dad, Mum.
Oh,
see, the one that doesn't get me. I do find it. Is that a bit of
a feminist butt, Josie? Because why can't a mother be encouraging about football?
Don't get me wrong.
A feminist butt.
You must take this issue up with the manufacturers and advertisers of dairy milk. I'm merely a pawn.
I'll be doing that later today as part of my daily feminism. I have to do a lot at home now, and it's sort of like doing your exercises at home. You have to do small stretches. Stretches when right into Cadbury's and complaining about 10-year-old ad.
Thank you. I'd be very. It's caused me a lot of distress.
Yet another patriarchal message from the purveyors of cocoa solids. The advert that I do find an absolute joy of, Tom, it's on, is the Guide Dogs for the Blind, in which a little girl is playing football and she's shouting to her dad what she's doing all the time, and then there's a revelation where
she turns to the dog and says, "You're a great dad."
Yeah. No, it's not what happens. Anyway, so we're going to do. Show and tell very quickly. My show and tell today is, amongst others, Tales of Unease by John Burke, who also went on to the film The Sorcerers. Sorry.
I just moved, my leg came into frame and I just wanted people to know I am.
That's one of those moments that's going to go viral, like the lady who went to the loo. It's just going to be like Josie Long just completely flashed.
Oh no, that's like in the very early days when people had webcams, and there would be that all of those threads, wouldn't there, about literally someone moving in the background or whatever. Everything became obsessed. Saw a knee. There was a knee today. Anyway, so Tales of Unease.
Tales of Unease sounds incredible.
John Burke and The Sorcerers, which was a screenplay that was written, great film with Boris Karloff. And I have the second pound book of horror stories as well. That's just one of the many. That's one of the gory covers. And the reason I have all of these is because my show and tell is to show and tell about the birthday of Johnny Maines, who Johnny Maines, who amongst many other things wrote this book about Herbert von Thal, who did all the pound book of horror stories. Also wrote a book which includes the screenplay of The Sorcerers, which he wrote with John Burke. Has wrote a book called A Disturbing Horror Story, which is a wonderful kind of novel. And if you love horror, and he's done loads of incredible, great kind of archive work as well as writing of his own. It is his birthday. I was going to say happy birthday to you, Johnny. And if you're watching as well, good morning to Marnie and Lou. And also to mention, he has a new book which he's written the introduction for. Todd Robbins, who wrote the story which Todd Browning's Freaks is based on, and also the Lon Chaney film The Unholy Three. They've just brought out for the first time in the UK some of his short stories, some of his very uncanny and strange short stories. Wow. And Johnny wrote the introduction for that. So, which is called Unholy Tales. It's by Todd Robbins. It has a great introduction by Johnny. Happy birthday, Johnny Maines. You are my show and tell for this morning.
That sounds really
So there we are. That's my
I'll show you mine. You already
have, Josie. That was we've covered that. You already have.
Show don't tell. My daughter's just coming up. She's learned how to do some really funny walks.
Oh,
haven't you? You playing the guitar?
My friend Ed Morris has trained his little boy to walk in like the little boy in that news clip. So that when he's on Zoom, his little boy comes in behind going. Can you show us fun things, or is she not allowed on?
No, she doesn't. She's a voice from off in that rather wonderful way, like the kind of the Mrs. Columbo, really, of the Shambles Stay at Home Festival. We know she exists, but I'll ask Deborah. I'm going to ask you before we do your show and tell. Something I would love to know about is we were doing a book Shambles in the small room of the Albert Hall when you were doing The Guilty Feminist at the Albert Hall in the main room.
Oh yeah,
and the enormity of the reception of everyone and so many of the ideas on stage. You know, I was kind of watching some of it from the back and just seeing this shit. And I wanted to know. I'm sure
were you at the Royal Albert Hall show? Were you watching Were you at the Royal Albert Hall show for The Guilty Feminist?
We were doing a show in the little room, so we came and kind of, I didn't
know that. There was drinks after, Robert. I would have invited you in for drinks if I'd known.
Yeah, we had to go and do a show in our little room, in our little Elgar room.
I've played the Elgar room. There's no need to be stiffy about the Elgar room. I've played that room. Lovely room. I had Sisters Uncut in there. I had Sisters Uncut and Stella Creasy together on the same bill, and they got on really well. Anyway, sorry, go on.
Well, to know about that moment what was the original thinking behind the Guilty Feminist podcast? Because it seems to be quite a rapid move from it just got picked up and loved, and then, as I said, full Albert Hall on a Sunday afternoon.
I think honestly, a lot of the success of it is that women are thirsty. And there just isn't a lot made for us by us, that hasn't been adulterated by a lot of other voices trying to sort of second guess what women want. So I started it 4 years ago with Sophie Hagen, and it just came off some lunches we were having where we were both at the same time going, because there was a wave of feminism coming up, and I remember getting really upset about things, and I felt like the conversations were turning away from us personally into feminist conversations naturally. Every time I had lunch with someone or drinks or something with someone, instead of talking about our own careers and our own love lives and things like that, it felt like this conversation had just shifted, and I started finding myself getting really angry. It first bubbled up for me in 2011 at the Adelaide Fringe Festival, where I had 3 or 4 revelations and big conversations, and one, I was crying and crying, like just trying to convince some men. I was crying like I'd just seen Clapton's Courageous. And I was trying to convince some men that it was harder for a young woman I was mentoring in comedy who was Muslim, covered, Asian, and that I couldn't get her gigs. I could only get her gigs on Asian women nights and things like that. And these men just would not accept it. They just said but they weren't just going, I don't think you're right. They were looking at each other and sort of slightly sniggering, like, she thinks, like, it was like a little gaslighting effect. One of them said, well, I'm a character comedian, so it's just as difficult for me. And I said, no, it isn't. You're not, that's not your identity. You could choose to do stand-up. And when you go into the club, you look like those boys. And so you can speak to them on a level. Anyway, so we were starting to have these conversations, and the thing Sophie and I were saying to each other is, I don't know if I'm really good enough to engage, because all the feminists I saw were so strident and confident. They really knew exactly what they thought. They were fighting a good fight in a really powerful and inspirational way. But I kept saying, well, yeah, but I'm secretly also want to look good sitting down naked. And no, they don't want that. All they want is gender equality. And I want all these ignoble things. And so we started sort of confessing those things to each other, and sort of said, comedians, therefore these conversations should obviously be broadcast. They're a waste between the two of us. Is someone recording this now? We were asking. And so we started it with a little fringe theatre, 30 people, and 30 people in the audience, 20 I could recognise and knew both first and surnames of, and 10 of their mates. And we put the first episode out, and we were hoping for 2,000 downloads, and then it got 10,000 like that, and then it got a review in The Guardian. I'd never had a review in The Guardian for anything. And then it just took off. And I honestly think there were so many women who were feeling, I want to be part of this, but I'm not sure I'm good enough to call myself a feminist. I'm not sure I'm good enough to be an activist. I'm not sure I'm really good enough to engage at this level. Who went, oh my God, thank God you've said that. If I don't have to be perfect to be a force for meaningful change, I'm in, I'll go for it. And so it sort of developed from there. And sort of about 9 months in, Sophie wanted to go off and do other stuff. She'd become more radical in her feminism, admirably, and she was interested in stuff around anxiety and fat acceptance. And so she wanted to go off and do her own thing. And I thought, well, I don't want to drop it because people are really getting a lot out of it. It wasn't huge then, like, it was just building, but it wasn't big. So I thought, I can have more diversity if I keep that seat open for different co-hosts, and then we can have lots and lots of women of different identities. And then we sort of understood we needed to make it more inclusive to people of minority genders as well as women. So we became more inclusive around trans issues and so on and so on. But I think I started the podcast to wallow in my own oppression, and what I've learned more than anything is about my own.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Turns out I'm not very pressed.
I feel that way about lockdown now. I'm like, all the crises I was having about my lack of purpose and lack of time to work were actually not really that bad. I was actually doing fine.
I would very much back to being low-level irritated about my amazing life. Mm-hmm. And that's what I feel all the time. But the thing is, I knew it. I've been saying it for years. I've been saying we are in a blip of a temporal geographical blip of choice and creativity and convenience and luxury. And so few human beings have had the experience that people in the West have had and certainly some people in the West very much more than others, between the Second World War. And I kept saying 2050. I kept thinking it was going to go till 2050, and I was off by 30 years. That I felt like this is going to be seen as this ridiculous era. We have been sitting down pretty much since 1950 in a warm. Many people in the West have been sitting down in a warm room.
And I think this sort of discounts the working class.
That's what I say.
Most people. Most people have probably been working in factory jobs I mean, but I totally, completely agree with the thrust of your point.
In the last few decades, if you looked at most lives in the West, unless you're homeless, if you're indoors and you're warm and you have enough calories for the week, it is still, I mean, it's the thing is, it's not because of the happiness is all relative. It's always relative. But I don't think we get quite, okay, this is something that, this is how I'm looking at. I'm not discounting those experiences, Josie. I'm really.
No, I know. I'm just being silly. I think that I totally get the thrust of what you're saying, and I think it's important. Like, I think we've been in a really unusual time, and I completely, like, in terms of like going to a grocery shop and seeing food from all seasons, all the time, whenever you want it, and things like that. It's I completely. Sorry, I wasn't.
No, I know exactly. I do know what you mean. I do think. Okay, this is something I heard on Radio 4 years ago. I think it was at the centenary of the First World War, and somebody asked an expert, how would young people today go if they had to go into the trenches, and in the First World War trenches? And the historian said it's not a useful question, because people who went into the trenches, men who went into the trenches, had really uncomfortable lives. So they'd all been down a mine or up a chimney or into some. They'd been standing up since they were born, dirty since they were born, hungry since they were born, and even the officer classes had been to really grim public schools where they had been hungry, they had been very cold, they had to, they'd been starved of affection, beaten regularly, like beaten on the reg severely. So everyone in the First World War who was in a fighting role had a horrible life up until that point. So the trenches were awful, but they were awful compared to a really, really terrible life. And now what the story was saying is most young people, even if they're disenfranchised and even if they've had a really, really, really tough upbringing on a council estate, have lived indoors and they've sat on soft things, and they've had, like access to sweets and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, so she was saying it's not a relevant question because of how difficult life was. And people got ill from fevers all the time and died, just constantly. People were just constantly dying. So I think what I'm trying to say is not, God, everyone's so lucky now, but more that I feel it's like, I've just felt this, like something like this brewing for ages, because how can we get away without something so vast, if you see what I mean?
That's what I think Hans Rosling's book, Factfulness, which did tremendously well, is a very useful book. It, first of all, reminding you that there has been a sense of progress, there has been a sense, but also, he uses that lovely term as opposed to when people called him an optimist. He said, I'm not an optimist, I'm a possibilist. These are the possibilities. We now have access to greater possibilities. But as he, underlined all the time, as does Steven Pinker in books like Better Angels of Our Nature, it doesn't mean it's going to, you have to work hard. It doesn't mean by saying life is better for a larger number of people than it was 50 years ago, 100 years ago, etc. Doesn't mean you can then go, oh, well, that's that done. It means you have to keep working really hard to, first of all, maintain that level, fight for that level, and then see if you can continue that kind of level of improving of the access to clean water, access to comfort, access to food, vaccination, and all of those things. It's a great book.
Completely. And I think that's why we do so much stuff with refugees over the last few years, because you see, like if when you go to refugee camps, the gap between, the thing is, I think most of us who are, trying to make change are finding an inequality and trying to close that inequality. And I think lots of us are just on a, sort of going, this is the thing that really, it's really what moves you. What's your Captain's Courageous? What's your Cadbury's advert? And for me, for the last few years, it's been refugees, because I think I can see how the gap. I can see how the gap can be closed quickly for some people, and their life can be so much dramatically better. And I think, I don't know, maybe I need to work for something where I can see a result or something like that. I don't know. I feel like, is this conversation meant to be funny? I'm depressing you. I'm really sorry.
Why is it depressing?
Can be whatever
We're just talking about lots of different things. It's not depressing. It's interesting.
I think I've seen personally seen and been part of refugees' lives changing from one of complete hopelessness and deep, repeated trauma, and to ones of safety and security and connection. And it's all about connection. If refugees get to the UK, if they're one of the lucky ones that get to the UK and they don't find connection when they're here, they're really, really unhappy, because when they were in Calais, they had hope. And if they get here and they end up maybe in accommodation, government provided accommodation, and maybe they get to go to school, but they have no connection and no community, then what am I hoping for now? And they lose hope, because they were promised the land of milk and honey. And then it turns out, I mean, in this case, someone has panic bought all the milk and all the honey. But I'm actually quite close to some refugees who at the moment, I can see how triggered they are by all of this, because they're like, well, this is a global pandemic. There's nowhere to run now. There's nowhere to run. Yeah. But all of the same triggers are going off of get ready to go, run, get ready to run, get ready to run. And there is nowhere to run. All the advice is stay indoors. And that's so counterintuitive if you've run from trauma before. Stay indoors. No, that's where they're going to get you. That's where it's going to happen. You know, you mustn't stay indoors. You must run, you must run, you must run. So it's my sort of flatmate and family member, Steve Alley, who's as much family to me as anyone in the world. And I really do mean that. He wrote an amazing article for the British GQ this week called "We Are All Refugees Now." And it's very cleverly written, sort of advice for people who are finding this difficult. And he says, obviously I'm being hyperbolic by saying we're all refugees now, but he says there's a lot of similarities, because the change has been thrust upon you. You didn't ask for it. You have to adapt to it. You have no choice, and you will, and you are. Look at you, you're doing it. And it's really great, because he puts himself and other refugees in the expert position, because they're all pictured as sort of vulnerable victims. And he's like, guys, we've got this. Here's your top 5 tips for getting through this. You will. There'll be a new chapter. But right now you're hoping to go back to your old life. And guess what? You're not going to get to do that. Old lives don't come back. But there can be good things about the new life. It's so brilliant and clever, because it's sort of really what it's doing underneath is making people empathise for refugees who previously wouldn't have, who would have read the GQ and thought refugees are, over there and sad and not us.
We better go.
My friend said exactly. Oh, sorry.
No,
my friend
no,
now said the same thing, because somebody staying with her, and she was saying that just like watching how, or like sharing how he splits up his day in a really sort of clear way of like praying and exercising and all the things that, like, understanding what you can control and what you can create under difficult circumstances, and how therapeutic that is and helpful it is to keep doing it. And like, and like you're saying, I think it's a really good thing if this, it's hard to go, a good thing that could come out of this, because you sort of want to go, does that outweigh the fact that the government's mismanaged it to, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and people are dying. No, I mean, it doesn't.
Truly. But a good thing to come out of this could well be that people find themselves more empathetic in ways that they didn't previously. And if that happens, what a good thing for society, and what a massively important thing.
I truly believe when Corona is at least managed so that we can come outside again, people will, if the nurses can walk out and say, pay us what we want or we're never going back, and people will say, you've got to pay them. I really think the RCN's got to do that. They really, really do. And also, people will pay teachers whatever they want. Am I allowed to swear on this show?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Whatever they fucking want. If the teachers went out and went, do you want us to take them back, or we could just go and get great gap years now? People would go, double it, triple it, whatever it takes. They are taking my children out of my home. I think those people are going to be paid a lot more. I really hope so.
Right, we need to go, because otherwise we're going to run out.
Do you want to see my show and tell?
No, because literally we've got 10 minutes left, and we haven't yet done 2 other performers. So we are going to come back and we are going to talk more. But first of all, we're going to go to a friend of yours, and then we'll do everyone's show and tell that's left. No. Someone you toured with a great deal, someone who writes beautiful music and works with lots of other fantastic people, and had a musician, very record label.
A Svengali. He's an island recluse. It's Johnny Lynch, aka the Pictish Trail.
He has a show and tell, and he has a song. So here is the Pictish Trail.
Hello. Hi, I am Pictish Trail. You can call me Barry. Don't call me Barry. That's the name of it's the name of another band. Hi, I'm Pictish Trail. Thanks for having me on the show. Thank you to Robin and Josie and to Trent for having me on the show. It's very nice of you to remember me. Full disclosure, I'm pre-recording this. I've got kids and my partner's a farmer, and this is a very busy farming time, and so I tend to look after the kids pretty much all day. And they're very young children. One is 1 year old and one is 4 years old. But in the scraps of time that I've had, I've done a bit of research. I've seen a few clips of the Cosmic Shambles thing you've done, and there's a show and tell element. Is that right? I don't know who I'm asking. So for my show and tell, I brought this shirt, which is a bit of Pictish Trail merchandise, which you can purchase from pictishtrail.co.uk. Bit of a plug. But it's not just a shameless plug for that. It's like this t-shirt has got lots of different characters on it. And I've just released an album called Thumb World, which was designed... The artwork for the album was designed by a guy called Swat Paz. Swat Paz. That's a household name in Scotland. And Swat Paz designed a character for each track on the album, which you can see in the album artwork. And so I made a t-shirt. And so, yeah, there's a song called The Bear with Heart Eyes. There's a song called Fear Anchor. There's a song called Turning Back. There's a little dancing clock there. And yeah, it's a nice, lovely shirt. Funnily enough, I'm about to play you a song from Thumb World. And it's the only song on the album for which I did not put the track character on the shirt. Because the track character for this next song, which I'm going to sing, called Double Sided, is a thumb, and it's a sort of weird disembodied thumb with its head taken off, and someone said it looked like a cock, so we didn't put it on the shirt. It's an interesting chord to start with. Have you ever heard a song that's ever started with that chord? I haven't. Listener, come forward. Move your seats forward. Let me tell you of a tale about a thumb that looked like a cock. Actually, I can... Well, no, I won't do that here just now. And I'll play the right chords now for this song called Double Sided. Hopefully I can remember how to play it. Back into another life it comes, all senses simulated, hypnotized through double-sided eyes. Here comes the levitation, all this time for never reason. I slide into reliving season, life by line in role reversal, rolling by till hearse rehearsal. Back and forth in summered vision, canary down, cool mind twitching, standing out over double-sided lines, pass away under the exit sign light. All this time, all this time, all this time, all this time, you've headed out the hypnotized through double-sided eyes, all sense incinerated, side to side, move side to side, side to side, move side to side. You said it out the wrong way, always back to front, don't wear it out the wrong way, singing live to see you coming back.
said it out the wrong way before the race is run. Don't wear it out the wrong way, always back to front. You've had it out the wrong way before the starter's gone. You've said it out the wrong. Oh, back and forth in summer vision, canary down the coal mine torch. Standing out over double-sided lines, I'll pass away under the exit sign light. All this time, for never reason, I'll slide into the living season. I see you coming back. Oh, I see you coming back.
Thanks. I've been Pictish Trail, and I'll be coming back later.
Hello, welcome
Welcome
back to Shambles Stay at Home Festival. We should say we haven't mentioned it at all today. The tip jar, we are doing a collection, creating a fund for some of the artists, musicians, singers, all manner of different things, comedians who have found, of course, all of their work has entirely vanished for at the very least the next 3 months, because not all performers, some of us are lucky and we have other things that we can do, and a lot of other performers are literally kind of quite hand to mouth on a daily basis doing their gigs. So we've got a fund for that, and we've also
And you've got performers who were working in insecure extra jobs as well, so they've lost literally everything they could have done as well.
Yeah, that's true. And we're also using that fund to help out some of the smaller venues that may well otherwise go under. Some of those venues have already gone under. Yesterday, we were the first couple of weeks. The money we gave some money to the Rondo in Bath, which is a wonderful.
The old fire station in Oxford, which is a fantastic place that does so much work in the local community, and the Little Angel Theatre in Angel.
Little Angel Puppet Theatre, which is wonderful. If you've not heard the episode of Book Shambles we did with Ronnie Drew, who was basically, as a child, he just loved puppetry and then ended up working on things like Labyrinth with David Bowie and Rainbow and all manner of things. And the next time we've managed to get enough money to donate some, we will move further north as well, just in case you think we're being very South-centric. That was just kind of the first burst, and we will keep moving those funds around. So thank you very much if you can donate. Hopefully it means that we can maintain some form of social and artistic life when we are free again. There was a question on the right at the beginning of the show which I didn't answer because it just didn't seem right during some of the other conversations. Someone said, what horror films would you recommend? I will. I don't know if it's available yet, but really brilliant. There's a film called Ready or Not, which is just an incredible. It's basically about a woman who marries into a family who have a huge collection of board games, and they made all of these board games. They're like a kind of Waddington's family.
And were any of them sexy board games, Robin?
No, there was no Ludo. Though, Cameron, for those of you who were watching, Stuart Lee going about Ludo, I was correct. There is an advert for a rude game called Ludo in the Goodies Book of Criminal Records.
Firstly, that's incredible. Ready or Not last year.
Yeah, it's great. It's really good horror film where it's basically about a woman, an insane family who end up in a situation. This gives away nothing. Where unfortunately, because the game card she pulls means she has to be killed before dawn, or something evil happens. And it's just a brilliant caper in a stately home. And I would also recommend really scary ones. I'm sure a lot of you know this, but Midsummer, made by the same director who made Hereditary. Very,
and also it's
such
a fun film to watch as a woman who has dated many jerks, because essentially it's a revenge plot on a jerky boyfriend, and the whole way through you're like it's really,
and then sometimes you do go, are these people bad enough to die in such an unpleasant manner? And there is the director's cut.
It's very, it's too much.
No, but that's the fun. That's a nice bit. I like those kind of films where you go, I'm just not. No, that feels a bit much. I think admonished rather than decapitated. There's that
and this is why you and I would make such a good revolutionary committee, because you'd be there to say no decapitations of this one, just an admonishment.
Yeah, and then I could do for 5 years. 5 years of
Can I recommend Yes, exactly. 5 years. Very good. Can I recommend? I'm sure everyone will have seen it, but the film of Ghost Stories, which was the popular stage show. It's genuinely frightening. It's a great film, and it really lends itself to multiple watches. It's a really great film.
I saw it. I was the only one in the screen when I saw it, and I saw it in that what's that lovely cinema in Birmingham? We did a gig there. It's a great
the Electric Cinema.
The Electric Cinema. So I was just sat in a small screen on my own watching Ghost Stories, and it really does crawl all over you. It's fantastic. We're going to the show.
The Invisible Man, the new version of The Invisible Man, is really good. Is that made by the production company? Bloomhouse, is it? Is it made by Bloomhouse? I'm waiting for Trent to pop
hanging. We'll leave that hanging. But Trent reckons I think so.
That's the best company, isn't it? Going these days, in my opinion.
Oh, well, I will. Also, by the way, again, you've probably all seen it, but I don't know. Get Out is a must.
Oh, yeah.
It's a really great film, and a film that I thought was going to be huge, and seems to it is Sorry to Bother You. Which is
I love that film.
Man, it's Boots Riley, isn't it? I think, as far as I remember. And it's a film which is, when it's a film, someone once said that the film, the song Cannonball by the Breeders is amazing because it has 3 different introductions. You start listening to one song and then you go, oh, it's just, and now it's become a 3rd song as well, all in the space of 20 seconds. And that's kind of what I think Sorry to Bother You does, which is it, you think it's one kind of film, and then you go, "Oh, now it's a very different film." And then by the end of it, you go, "Oh, no, it really was." It does so many things.
Please allow me to recommend my zero-budget feature film available on demand, Super November, which also does something similar, but with slightly less success.
In that case, can I recommend my film, Say My Name, which is not a horror film? It's a sort of old-fashioned screwball comedy where the woman's sort of running around going, "I can run a newspaper as well as you or any man." She doesn't say that. It's in that genre. She doesn't say that at all. It starts with a one-night stand where he can't remember her name in bed, and they get involved with some bad guys, and so on and so on and so on. And you can get it on iTunes and Amazon Prime and stuff like that.
We're recommending our films. Can I recommend Razzle Dazzle?
It's so good.
A film that I made in 2008, which is about dance competitions.
It's a fantastic film, and you have such a funny cameo in it, Robin.
I'm a cow.
I also have a funny cameo in my film, but I do not have one in Robin's.
Now, listen, guys, we've all made films
to recommend,
and everyone can watch those films in one night, and it will be the best night of their lives. And we all suggest that they do it.
Yes, we'll live tweet them.
Triple bill of ambition.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry, we're going to introduce now. So I'm trying to think. I think I first met him down in Southend. Was it down in Southend at the Railway Tavern? His name is Pope Lonergan. He's a comedian. He is a writer. He does lots of really interesting events as well. And some of I would say a comedy historian as well. You have an incredible deep knowledge of. I think one of our first conversations must have been about Rick Mayall, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yes, it was. Am I on now? All right. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I would like to recommend my film that I haven't made yet, but I probably will at some point, I reckon. I think it was. Yeah, I think in the Railway, talk about Rick Mayall. But yeah, I want to talk about something that I just remembered this morning. So my favourite conception of God is something that there's a Dutch philosopher that Samuel Beckett was really into, and his name's Geulincx. I don't know how to pronounce that. Anyway, so his conception of God was this idea of the faraway God, a God that kind of made creation, then looked out the window and has no bearing on any kind of cosmic activity, just made it and pissed off. That's his thing of God. And so in rehab, I am a junkie. When I went to rehab, we had to come up with this idea of a higher power, that we had to give ourselves over to a higher power. And when I was 6 years old, I remember went to a mild hoarder's house and looked underneath the sofa, and there was like just one single bit of sweet corn there. And then I went back 4 years later, looked under the same sofa, the sweet corn remained. And when in rehab, they asked me what my higher power was, I panicked and said that bit of sweet corn. So that bit of sweet corn has become imbued with significance to me now, kind of like the faraway God from that's in Beckett. So yeah, just saying. And every time when I pray to my higher power, it's always a bit of sweet corn. So,
but that does have cosmological kind of perspective to it, because the sweet corn can become popcorn. So that idea of expansion, not at the same rate, obviously, at the beginning of the universe, but nevertheless, I see why sweet corn was your chosen vegetable to worship.
It feels a very Douglas Adams god to have.
Yeah, I quite like it. I quite like that. That is my and like Robin says, it makes perfect sense. So I definitely.
Also, you got Alan Moore choosing to worship ancient snake gods, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly. I like the idea of the same way that if I get a jumper made, I'll get it custom made with like, I don't want to have a jumper that someone else has, and I liked Alan Moore for that reason, that he chose his own god. And so yeah, I'm glad that my god is a sweet corn. But
very varied and interesting show today, and one that I'm actually thrilled to be a part of.
I'm going to get a jumper made that just says on it whatever Pope Lonergan's wearing, and therefore I feel in some way covers you. I wanted to ask you about one of the things is, as well as you've done, as well as working in care homes, you've also done gigs in care homes and organised things like that. And one of the reasons today in particular was we were seeing that in the news that a lot of the statistics from care homes, etc., are kind of being ignored. And you wrote something the other day, which I think you sent to Stuart Lee, which I thought was a very interesting perspective on what we're seeing on different senses of philosophy and people's reaction to the mortality in this.
Yeah. Well, Stuart asked me to kind of provide a detailed account of my experiences with the elderly care, and for a long time we've been the elderly care system has been failing for a long time. And one of the companies I used to work with, the individuals who manage the homes and the carers are wonderful, but the people who are the directors, they would plead poverty and take away small. Seems trivial but really impactful to the residents. I'd take away things like peanut butter to save money, and these residents look forward to just peanut butter on toast every day. Makes their day a bit brighter. I actually do a bit of stand up about me starting a coup d'etat with people with dementia as a result of this deprivation, but and they would always get us to turn like heating off and turn electricity off even in the winter, again to save money. But these directors were still awarding themselves £1.2 million bonuses. I think each of the directors, they got a £4.4 million salary in 2017, and we have seen this crumbling system. I was in elderly care for 8 years. For 8 years, it's never been any different. There's been skeletal staff. There's been.
That's why you want to go. How can these things possibly be run at a profit when they're about people's welfare and lives? That's where I can't understand how people can justify it. I can't physically bear it.
I completely agree. I got quite emotional talking about it. Like, I've devoted my life to these people, and I'm they're an extension of my family. They really are. I'm not just saying that to be cloying and saccharine, and I really did love these people very much. And any healthcare or welfare organisation should not be profiteering in that way, and it shouldn't. I agree. It shouldn't be a privately owned company who's dealing with this, because they are just worrying about their bottom line, and to the detriment of the welfare of the residents and the welfare of the staff. I mean, I work with staff members who are sit in their 60s. They had lupus. I have Crohn's disease, so that I'm autoimmune deficient, and no PP has been provided. The care companies are unwilling to pay for agency staff to fill the gaps in staffing, because agency staff cost more per hour. And it's diabolical, but it's been this way for ages. It's been this way for a long time, and now a light is being shone on it, but unfortunately under terrible circumstances. So I think that's something I really want to kind of raise awareness of. And I'm a rabble rouser. I can be stubbornly defiant with certain things if I see that companies not being run very well, and residents are suffering as a result of that, the elders are suffering, then I'm going to bang on about it. So thank you.
Where is the best place to, in terms of, because this is one of the problems, is a lot of these things go unreported until they become something which for a brief day, you know, is a flare of melodrama, and then it dies off and we don't get. So where are the best kind of sources of people getting information about what is actually going on, apart from, you know, obviously you, and there must be other people as well, I presume, who are hopefully writing about this?
The details about what I got from the Guardian, but I haven't really seen anywhere that covers it that extensively. It's always a bit of like surface detail on what's going on, but I've not seen anywhere that's really digging deep into this. And again, it's because I suppose the whistleblower thing in medical industries can be quite porous, and people are worried about, usually, you know, very, very low income. For instance, to shine a light on that. So in Edinburgh, I was part of Phil Ellis's show, and I had to daily, what I had to do was dress up as a shit clown, pretend to suck off a trombone, get shot dead by Phil, and then Phil would call me a podgy slut while I was on stage. Anyway, so that was me. That was what I had to do as part of Phil Ellis's show. I got £10 an hour for that show, which is £2.40 more than I got from helping to continue an elderly person's life. And people, it's very low income, and people are just worried about job security, which is threatened when you raise the alarm about this stuff. Yeah. So I'm not really seeing anywhere. I mean, there's some wonderful things, like this book's great, What Dementia Teaches Us About Love, and that looks into like the philosophical aspects of neurodegenerative diseases. There's an amazing article in the New Yorker and one in Harper's that were sort of the three best things I've ever read about this, but aren't going into the institutional failings of the care sector.
Well, but that's the other thing, is like, would you talk a little bit about the gigs that you've done in care homes and what it was like doing that tour? Because I think it's such a brilliant thing and so beautiful. And tell me more.
Thank you, Josie. Yeah, so we noticed, even when I've talked to people from Age UK and that, is that they will just focus on the very essential medical needs, but they won't focus on the holistic benefits of trying to encourage a sense of play within the residents, to try and make them laugh. They're good with stuff like music, which is amazing, and it really does help to keep these people stimulated and engaged and feel like they're still part of the world. But when I've gone in to these care homes, we wanted to find a way to sort of the holistic benefits of nurturing the human behind the illness. And what we say is, like, we go in, it's like an improv troupe where 3/4 of us have dementia. So we allow them, we have a sort of rough framework of what we might do, but we allow them to guide the sense of play. And there will be some who are happy to just, sit back and process what's going on in a very passive way. They don't want to be a participant, and we absolutely, accept that, and we won't disturb those people. But then you usually find, when you start, joining in with these games, there'll be people who will be very vocal and really want to be part of the activity and what's going on. So then they become part of the improv troupe. And so the last one we did at Leicester Comedy Festival, we had Jos Norris and Luke Rollison and Nathan Lang. And unfortunately, Ben Tarjay, who I co-created with, wasn't able to make it down. But Jos Norris went in with a box, and this was supposed to be a memory box of our most sacred memories. You put all your most sacred memories and objects in the box. But then people started putting in their actual house keys, and it looked like we were just trying to gouge. like we were con men who were trying to gouge. But then that became part of the narrative that we were. That became part of the narrative that we were creating. And then one of the gentlemen who put his keys in there kept saying that how weak and how puny that we all looked. So then we started an arm wrestling competition with him. Then we were talking And then me as MC, I would say to all the residents, like, we're going to judge all the performers and we're going to see how much money we get to reduce off of their fee if we think they're really rubbish. And then it became a thing of me and all the residents from a panel judging John Norwich tying himself up with string and trying to untie himself. And then we found our a gentleman who was a carpenter, so he became our resident carpentry expert. And then me and him engaged in this dialogue about creating a birdhouse that was so big that if our children were being a real nuisance, we could pop them in the birdhouse to get them shut up from it. And then the other residents had like input in like why that would be a good idea, some why that would be a bad idea. It just, that's what it's a way to create a conversation and allow them to get back in touch with their ludic selves. So and that's kind of what we're doing.
I really wish that someone would make a documentary and follow you guys, because I think it's something that is so would be such a blessing to watch and would be so beautiful. Similarly to what we were talking about earlier in the week with the Young at Heart choir. Is that what they're called? The Young at Heart?
Yeah, Young at Heart Chorus. Yeah.
Young at Heart Chorus. I think.
Or is it choir? I can't remember now.
I can't.
But anyway, what I will say is we have to end because we've gone way over time. And I'm sorry we didn't do your show and tell. We didn't do Pope's show and tell. But I think there were lots of wonderfuls. All yours. So there's a real backlog of show and tells. It's a rollover week for show and tells.
Can I just plug one thing, Robin? My version of my show, Pope's Addiction Clinic. That's at 9 p.m. 8th of May through Next Up's online stream.
That, and we'll put the links up as well. Deborah, is there something you would like to obviously the Guilty Feminist podcast?
I'm doing an Instagram live at 6 p.m. called The New Normal, where I interview a guilty feminist regular or friend of the podcast about how their time in quarantine, asking them the same questions. They all go up on YouTube afterwards. We had Tom Allen last night. We've got Samantha Baines. There's ones with Mae Martin, Aisling B. Sindhu V's is very, very beautiful because she talks about the death of her mother. Some of them are some of them are like very funny, but hysterically funny. And then suddenly everyone starts crying. I need to warn you of that. You're watching raw emotion in quarantine. The New Normal, 6 p.m. The Guilty Feminist Insta live feed.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you, Josie. Go to the tip jar if you can. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube and also our Patreon to make all of the other things that we do. I think we're going to leave you with a song. Again, another song from Johnny the Pictish Trail. We're either going to leave you with that or we're going to leave you with nothing at all. Let's find out what happens. We're not. Goodbye.